Hey, welcome back. This is Shah. I thought I'd do something simple today, like a kind of story time, specifically a child support story time. If you're new to the channel, I worked at a child support agency for about 5 years, a little over actually. And my job there was to open cases, enforce child support judgments against people, established child support judgments. I'd do the little genetic test swabs to find out paternity, who's the dad, that kind of thing. And in my time there, I saw all kinds of cases, for large amounts, small amounts, all kinds of things. And sometimes when I sit down and think about it, there are certain cases that I just remember vividly or that stuck out to me. And for today's child support story time, I wanted to talk about a case involving a well-to-do gentleman. And I had, been given this case opening, and there was already an order attached to it. So the mom and the two kids, they already had a judgment from a court that ordered child support, from their divorce. So usually when that happens, if somebody already has a child support order, they can just walk right into our office and we'll start enforcing it on their behalf. And so this lady had one from her divorce, and it came across my desk. So my job was to get the case going, open up accounts so that, we can start calling dad and sending out wage assignments and getting the money home to mom. And this case just immediately stuck out to me as different. And the reason I say that is because I've seen so many divorce judgments and child support orders in my time working there. Most divorce judgments are like that thick, It's just kind of the standard run-of-the-mill language and sort of template-looking divorce judgment that a lot of attorneys use. Kind of a cookie-cutter divorce, But this one was different. This one was like this thick. It was such a thick packet of papers that came across my desk, and I immediately knew this case was special. And I immediately knew that this case just cost a lot of money. This was not the Happy Meal sort of McDonald's combo meal of divorces. This was like the Ferrari of divorces. The attorneys that worked on this probably charged a pretty penny. And they in fact did, because I saw the attorney's fees. And as a good child support officer, getting paid by the hour, I made sure to read every single page of that divorce order, not just out of curiosity, but also to make sure that I wasn't missing anything. Because when we open up accounts and start charging people, we have to look through the entire case history that's gone through court, and we have to get an accurate understanding of, what happened in those orders. Because a judge might start off with a certain kind of amount of support, then they might go back to court and that might change depending on new information. So when we open up an account, we don't want to open up based off the old order, but maybe I missed that there was a new order somewhere in there that changed the amount, and we don't want to charge the people the wrong amount. So I spent a lot of time just reading this case, and it was a pretty hefty order. The guy was in the medical field, pretty high up there medical field. He did surgeries, basically. So he was a surgeon. And there was spousal support and child support on this case. So the way the federal child support program works is we enforce child support, but if there is a spousal support order attached, we will enforce the spousal support also, so long as we're enforcing child support. So if those kids emancipate and we're not enforcing child, we'll stop enforcing the spousal support for mom, or whoever, it could be dad. And in that case, the kids were young, probably 5 and 7 possibly. It was 2 kids, so there was a hefty spousal support amount. I mean, I think altogether, I can't remember exactly, but I think the child support amount for the 2 kids was about $3,500 a month, somewhere there. And the spousal support was God, it was around like 10 grand just for the spousal support. So altogether, it was pretty high. And I'm just like, wow, that's a pretty big order, you know. And as I was working the case, I reached out to, you know, I got to reach out to the parties to let them know, hey, you know, we're going to start opening accounts and doing all this stuff. Called mom, told her. I called dad. I usually call dad first, actually, I think in that one. And he was represented by an attorney, so I had to talk to his attorney. And when I talked to the attorney told me, he was just like, hey, don't open the accounts on this case. Don't start charging. And I'm like, well, I have a judgment here telling me to, you know, charge X amount for whatever this is, so I got to do it, you know. And he's like, well, I'm working on getting a stay on enforcement because I'm going to get this modified. And I said, well, you know, okay, I mean, do you have the stay? He didn't have the stay. And he told me he was going to get it retroactively modified, which I didn't believe at first because it was kind of a general rule around the building that we don't retroactively modify child support. So typically we'd only modify child support after a file date on our motions, and it's not often that California goes back and says, hey, we're going to go revisit this past child support, unless there's like a very specific reason, but it just doesn't happen that often. This was the only time I ever seen that while I was working there. And it was a pretty big amount too, so I was like, well, I didn't know what to do, so I went upstairs to our principal attorney. We had a whole attorney's wing that worked for the county, and I specifically spoke with the principal attorney, and the reason I spoke with him, he was the boss of the attorneys, was because this guy who represented the person that needed to pay, he kept name dropping him. He was just like, do you know so-and-so? You know, I know so-and-so, and, you know, so don't do this. And the guy that I turned out, you know, I was talking to, this attorney representing this surgeon, it turned out he was an ex-child support judge that was retired. So this guy had hired an ex-child support judge to be his attorney. So I'm like, all right. So I go upstairs, I talk to the principal attorney. I'm like, hey, this guy is name dropping you. What do you want me to do on this case? Because I don't want to open up and start charging this guy, you know, 13, 14 grand a month, whatever it is. And this attorney here, who's also a retired child support judge, who apparently says he knows you, is telling me not to do it. And the principal attorney is just like, does he have an enforcement stay? And I was like, no, but he said he's going to get one. He's like, well, if he doesn't have it, then start charging him. Just go ahead and open accounts, just like you would any other case. I was like, are you sure? This guy really? He's like, yes. So I go back downstairs. I call the attorney back, and I'm like, hey, this is what, you know, he told me, so I'm going to open accounts. And, you know, he wasn't too thrilled about that. And, you know, we did have to let his client know that we're going to be charging and he's got to start paying and all that stuff. I let mom know, so I'm like, hey, mom, okay, it's opened and we're going to be trying to get payments for you. And time goes on. Oh, my God. I remember I did read every word of that case, and it was a pretty crazy divorce. This guy made pretty good money. He's a surgeon. She really didn't make much money. I don't even know if she was employed at the time or not, but it was pretty insignificant. And the attorney's fees, he had to pay not only his attorney's fees, of course, but he had to pay her attorney's fees. So just by the time I was looking at it on the case, it was at least about $180,000 of attorney's fees. It was with his and hers. Hers were about 70, and his was 110 or 111 or something like that. And the case wasn't done, I mean, because he's still paying this guy that I'm on the phone with trying to explain that, hey, I got to open this case. That's all billable hours for that guy. So it's not even over yet. And okay, so fine, I open up the case, and you know, at that time we had it broken up to where it's I'd establish the case, I'd send it off to the next worker who'd then start enforcing the case and doing the calls, trying to get the money. But I remember later on, I actually got curious and I went to look at the case because I was like, I wonder what happened with this case. And I didn't even do this too often, but sometimes when I seen a case like that seemed like it was different from the rest, I would sometimes go back in and try to understand, like, so what ended up happening with this case? And lo and behold, that case actually got the stay on enforcement. And I was like, well, okay, well, he wasn't lying. So he got a stay on enforcement as this case went in to get a retroactive modification. So I was like, wow, he might actually do it. How is he going to convince the courts to retroactively modify a spousal support and child support order based off of this income? And the way he did it was actually quite ingenious. Like, I'll just spill the beans now. He was successful in doing it, and he got it reduced to such a, I guess for us normal guys, it would still be like pretty expensive, but a very paltry amount. And the way he did it was, so this guy was a surgeon. He had this guy see a psychiatrist who I wouldn't even be surprised if they knew each other and played golf on Sundays. That's my imagination, but it just seemed to work out so well. And the psychiatrist or whatever basically said that, this was in the documents that I read for the justification of why it was modified. Basically said that, the guy's mental health or something that had happened to him affected his mental health so badly that it affected how many surgeries he can realistically do, per month. And that even though this guy was making it was a lot of money because he had what he was making plus like another business in the same field. I think it was at least $500,000 a year, somewhere there. Maybe, I can't remember exactly, but it was a lot. And he basically said this guy's mental health only allowed, he was only really able mentally to do one surgery a month or something like that. So that made his effective income around $50,000 a year or somewhere there. It was like literally a tenth of what he was making. It was crazy. I couldn't believe it. And they had an actual medical doctor, psychiatrist state this, as an expert, basically. And the court accepted this. So the court accepted that was the income amount that he was capable of making, regardless of him making that amount prior. And they retroactively modified all the child support for those months to go from about $13,000, not just the child support, but the spousal support also, to go from there to about, it ended up being like $1,500 a month or something for everything. It was it went from that to way the heck less. And I was like, wow, I can't believe that guy actually successfully did it. They had to have been laughing about this over cigars after this guy pulled it off. And I'll always remember that judge, just because the way he would talk to me, he kept mispronouncing my name, and it almost seemed like on purpose. But this guy was just so confident about it. Probably cost a lot of money. I mean, he probably could have saved money if he just paid the spousal and child support order. But instead, he was just like, no, I'm going to get this changed. And this was such a this almost never happens. This was a once in a career thing that I think people see, but he successfully got that not only modified from the current to ongoing, but retroactively modified. And, I guess it pays, well, I don't even know if it pays. It's probably a Pyrrhic victory for that guy, but it worked out for him hiring a retired child support judge to be his attorney in this case. And, us as the child support enforcement agency, we're kind of handcuffed by the courts. So whatever the courts tell us to do, that's what we do. We just get orders and enforce them. But I always remember that case because a lot of guys really, weren't that lucky. They weren't going to be able to avail themselves of that level of of genius when it comes to crafting a case and putting it together and threading it through all these different wiry laws that we have. And this guy was able to do it. So that kind of really represented something to me in terms of watching how legal proceedings happen. You know, most people get the run-of-the-mill treatment. And for the most part, as a general rule, I always feel like attorneys were a waste of time to hire. Like, as a child support officer, I spoke with so many attorneys who were just wasting their clients' money and did nothing for them. Like, the person would have been better off if they just did nothing. You know, if they just sat there like a rock and let our office do its thing, they would have ended up with the same child support amount, and they would just save some money not hiring an attorney. But this was like the one exception where it just seemed like the attorney was able to do what he said he was going to do. And reading his argument and seeing how he had it put together was very impressive for me. And it really allowed me to see the difference between like a bad attorney and a good attorney and how the law works. I remember when I graduated college, I had this professor that I really liked, and well, I was going to say her name, but it's probably not the best idea to do that. But I had several classes with her. I had my first year of college for English composition, but she also taught religious studies classes. And I would like to take those classes just as like a general requirement. And it was just fun to not have to think about the normal stuff I was studying and be able to take what was, in my opinion, a fun class. She taught like a religion and language class. I think the last class I took with her was on human rights. And that was my last year of college. And, you know, we were graduating. I think it was spring semester, whatever was the last, it was around graduation time. And she said that her professor, when she graduated, had told these words to her, and that it was this: we don't live in a world of facts, but we live in a world of very clever arguments. Every single thing you think is a fact or is known 100% totally is actually just a very clever argument put together. And seeing that case and seeing how attorneys work, there are certain things in the law that seem pretty down pat, but an attorney's job really is to come up with the most cleverest argument they possibly can to help their client out. And I saw that in action that day. So that man was privileged enough to be able to get an attorney that was that good. I don't know how it turned out with them on the case later on, because the agency does monitor income. We can see IRS, you know, self-employment income coming in. If you got a job that's, you know, above the table at a company or something, we see quarterly earnings come into our system. So, you know, it could be later on that they saw more income coming in than maybe he's actually making, or who knows what he did. Maybe he found another way to shield his income, possibly. Anything can happen, you know. So, but yeah, I think that's enough for child support story time today. And I might share some other stories, you know, just based off what I saw, and it might help illustrate how child support works. But yeah, if you like that, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. I like reading people's comment, and if you feel like you learned something from this video, share it with somebody. And I will see you on the next Child Support Storytime Hour. Or if you want to see me sooner than that, I do stream every Saturday night at 7 p.m. on the channel. And I do want to get more standalone videos out. I feel like streaming is cool and fun, and I like streaming, but I sometimes feel like streaming is almost the lazy way out, because, you know, you don't have to record independently, edit stuff, put together. It always felt easier to me, but I do like making videos that are kind of this true YouTube style that isn't just streaming and stuff like that. So anyways, have a good one, and I'll see you on the next one.